Welcome to the Clarinet Ninja Podcast. My name is Jay Hassler. As always, I'm doing my best to bring you the finest in clarinet information and entertainment. Today, Mr. Evan Christopher is playing us in. Why is that, you may ask? Because Evan is here to talk with us about playing the clarinet. Now, here's what I want you to do. As you're listening to this, jot down one or two ideas, or just make a mental note of how we can take these ideas of detail, clarity, intention, joy, interpretation, making the music the composer intended, but still making the music ours. How do you do that? Evan's got a good handle on it. If you are a classical player or, somebody who reads music and that's what you want to do, there's a lot to be taken from this and translated into our own experience about imagining the detail, playing the music as if you thought of it yourself. There's lots of things. And I want you to have some ideas. I want your mind to be alive with how this can apply directly to what you're doing. Because no matter where you are on the clarinet, this can apply to you. Now, this whole conversation is a tribute to something that's really, really important and something that I talk about with the Clarinet Ninja Dojo, which is a great place for you to learn the clarinet. Why is it great? Because it goes to this central point that we are talking about in this conversation, which is foundational principles in the clarinet apply to whatever you want to do with the clarinet. You take those skills, you take those foundational principles, and you turn that into your own voice that you get to play music with that comes from the skills you get from this same, I would say, the hub of a wheel. The spokes come out, the spokes can lead you anywhere you want to go. Now, Evan and I studied with the same clarinet teacher at California State University, Long Beach in the early 90s, which is where we initially became friends. And this person's name is Gary Bouvier. He is a terrific person. And Gary, if you're listening, I want you on this podcast, please, to talk about these things that Evan and I are musing so passionately about, which is these foundational principles, because you are in the center of the hub that is all of that. And so whenever you hear us talking about Gary, that is who we're talking about. He has had a profound impact on me, my life, my clarinet playing, and the same for Evan. Enjoy this conversation with Evan. Leave a review. 5 stars. Comment. Like. Everything. Go check out Evan. Go check out me. Join the dojo. Come on, let's play some clarinet. Anything you can do to encourage the algorithm to put this out to people that love the clarinet as well. That would be fantastic, because I would love for as many people as possible to get to hear this conversation and the others that I've had on this podcast. No further ado, I present you Evan Christopher. 1992.
Gosh.
Long time ago.
Do I have to?
Yes, you have to.
Wow.
So yeah, we both had more hair.
We did.
But I think it's probably the only difference.
Okay, so, all right. It's 1992.
Yes.
There is a parking lot.
Yeah, giant parking lot.
I think in 1992, I might have been driving the Volkswagen.
You were?
I think it was red.
I think so.
Red Carmen Ghia, 72. You had maybe a silver Corolla with Alaska plates.
Holy crap! Yes, no, you're totally right on that. I didn't have the Alaska plates for long because I got a ticket for them.
No. When I met you.
Yeah. But no, okay. You're right.
So, we don't actually have a class together, but we have the same private instructor. The great Gary Bouvier.
Yes.
And we did in the mornings, I think maybe once or twice a week, we did a clarinet ensemble class of some kind.
Yeah, we did like a studio class. Like it wasn't necessarily an ensemble class. We may have done that with some of the classes, but that's when, when we all get together and play for each other and, and all that kind of stuff.
And then were you also playing some saxophone or was that later?
I was playing saxophone for sure. Yeah. I was very interested in playing saxophone at that point. Much more than I am now, for sure.
From the parking lot, there's a little grassy knoll that takes you to an underground bunker that has about a dozen practice rooms.
No, it was like 50 practice rooms, but yes.
Oh, really? Okay.
It was a lot. It went down a long way. We just never went down there. Right. It went all the way down underneath the recital hall.
And it was oh, okay. I didn't know that. I didn't,
you never walked
I didn't use them that much. I didn't have a problem practicing at home. But we commuted. We didn't live on the campus. We had to commute, and I can't remember where you lived exactly, but I was, David Sills and I shared a townhouse, just, I don't know, it was probably 5 miles away.
Well, it was just over the Orange County border, right?
I think technically it was Stanton. Yeah,
I just moved from Arizona. I'd gotten frustrated with my studies in Arizona, and I was coming out to study with Gary, and I remember I didn't actually meet you. You've heard me tell you this story before. I had never met you before, and we had to sign up for a spot to audition for the band, and so you had to write your name and what instruments you play. And so, you know, as a nerd, I walked up, I put my name, and I put clarinet. And right above, I guess you had just done it, and it had said, and then Evan Kuntz, the name that you used back then, and then it said, that old licorice stick.
I wrote that.
Yes, you did. I thought, who the heck is this Joker?
Yeah.
and here we are, 30 years later. I know this Joker very well.
But yeah, it was Evan Christopher Kunst, and then I dropped the Kunst, and then.
What I remember, like obviously it's your name, you would remember better than me. You weren't even using Christopher at all. Was there a time that you didn't use?
Well,
Christopher?
I mean, that's a lot of letters. It never you put your whole name, so. Yeah. And it cuts letters off.
Yeah.
Even now, my airplane tickets say Evan Christop.
No, and then I remember we played in the wind ensemble, and we sat next to each other for a little while.
Got it. Yeah.
Well,
there was a fella who looked like the Muppet Sam the Eagle. His name was Curious.
Yes, I think he just recently passed away, so let's be nice.
Oh, sorry.
No,
I didn't know that.
No, actually, I'm just kind of guessing that. But no,
well, who's not being nice now? He's could still be alive.
I'm
writing him off already.
I'm not guessing that. I do think I heard that, but I may be wrong because.
Well, Sam the Eagle on the Muppet Show was quite regal. So. He was a regal eagle. It's not being insulting. I took conducting from him. It was a good class. I got a lot out of that.
He was. I just remember him being revered and feared in a very particular way. Like people at the school really wanted to impress him.
Oh,
like that was my take on it. I don't think you cared.
Well, it was my junior year. I came in as a junior because I'd done all my undergraduate stuff at the junior college level. So when I came in, I only had 2 years left.
Well, then I guess we came at the same time, kind of.
Maybe so.
It's funny because when you come in halfway through, you don't know who else is coming in halfway through. I thought that you'd been there for a long time. You seemed more known than I did for sure. Like nobody knew me. But let me tell you when I all of a sudden you made sense to me. Because Brian Wallace says, "Oh, we got to go hear Evan play at Brian knew more cool stuff about what was going on in the world than anybody else, and it was pre-internet, so you couldn't research anything. So you had to know somebody that knew the stuff to go see.
Yeah.
Right? So Brian always seemed to know what to do.
And he was already playing on the ska scene a little bit.
I think that really hit a little bit a couple years after that. But he always knew exactly what was happening. And so we went to the Fulton Hofbrau. And that was the first time I heard you actually play the clarinet the way you play the clarinet. because, hearing you play in band was not really revealing of what your actual skill set is. Not that you weren't doing well, and you played fine. I do remember one day you put your clarinet down and you started to write the chords of whatever chorale or the thing that we were playing. You were just sort of madly scribbling the chords. And I thought, his ears are way better than mine. I mean, you could have just been making stuff up, but I don't think so.
Oh, no, I was already big on taking shortcuts for my reading. I still take shortcuts for my reading, so I will use chord nomenclature just to make it so I don't have to read all the notes.
That's hilarious. So then we went to hear you play at the Forward and Hofbrau, and I was like, oh, I get what he does now.
Yeah, but that was in the early 90s. I was still playing Bame system. I had never even. I don't think I didn't know. I didn't have an outer system. So, and I think I was playing. Oh gosh, probably a Janusa or something relatively closed. So maybe even if I was switching at all, it might have been a stock Van Doren 5JB or something like that. So I don't know that I was playing like anything like I do now.
Well, I would say that that's true. And I want to attach of course I want to make it about me, my remembrance of things, because it's very specific. But I just remember hearing you play and thinking to myself, oh, he's not interested in playing the clarinet the way I'm interested. Like we're not trying to play the same music, right? But at the same time, I very much would. I was studying jazz. I wanted to be a jazz player, but even as I was doing it, I was sort of aware that, well, I can do this and I can be serviceable at it. I wasn't what Evan was like, and that. When you want to do something that always hurts a little bit, but at the same time, it's also nice to be very close to it. And so, yeah, you were definitely playing a Bame, but there was two things that really struck me. And I think you've heard me say this before. Like it was the presence on stage, right? It was a very clear musical intent. But then the most beautiful part about it was during the break, how incredibly elegant and charming you were to all the old ladies that came to the Hofbrau to hear you play.
Yeah, I have my old people.
Well, and I vividly remember you saying we were talking when we came up to you and you said, it was absolutely not creepy. It might sound creepy the way I say it, but it basically said, hey, your husband's lucky that I got to go play that. I got to play music all the time because I'd love to have a dance with you or something. Or it was something that was so incredibly charming, warm and human and very, inviting, in a way that was not creepy. The way I said it may have been creepy, but I thought, oh, okay. But then as I got to know you, I'm still working this out. What's a put on and what's actually like your real personality? Not a put on in a bad way, but what's part of the presentation? Because the thing that's always been fun for me is to see your presentation because it's great music, but it's also delivered in a way that is really, to me, enchanting and inviting and human.
You have to get to that place faster than you might naturally. So that part's a little bit put on. It's like you are yourself, but you're yourself on someone else's timetable. If that makes sense.
I think
right?
I got it. Yeah.
You have a very limited amount of time to not just be yourself, but to show yourself. So whether it's the 15 minutes before a gig or the 15 minutes after a gig or the 45 minutes or 75 minutes during a gig, you have to force yourself to distill yourself into something that's more direct. You don't get to take the time with people that you would. And I think this is why I actually don't really enjoy live musical performance anymore. Because there is something a little bit, I'll say artificial about that process. Not dishonest, just a little bit artificial because you're just on someone else's, you're on someone else's schedule. It's not yours.
No, well, I get it. And forgive me if I made it sound like it wasn't genuine.
Oh, no, I get it. I struggled with that because I don't, and then also if you're obligated to say a narrative, if the music's supposed to have some narrative that you want to convey, you have to find a way to convey it possibly with more enthusiasm than you are predisposed to.
The time by which we've known each other is longer than the time we didn't know each other in our lives, right? So
that's true. We're old.
There's 20 years I didn't know you, and now there's 32 years that I do know you, right? So like it's swayed that way. And as a friend and as a fan, one of the things that I really, it gets me every single time that even if I'm, if I see you before a gig and you're in some version of grumpy old man and this and that, as soon as the clarinet goes in your mouth, there is something that you can't stop from exuding joy, right? When you're playing music, maybe you don't want to admit this, I don't know, but there's something that comes out of you that is, it's magnetic and it's exciting. And, I don't know how somebody could do it the way that you do it without actually having some feeling of joy and excitement going on in them.
The short answer is that cynicism is a form of optimism in a way, right? Cynicism is a form of optimism. You can't really be a cynic unless you have some ideal that the world isn't meeting, right? So that's quite optimistic in a way, right? Because there's some ideal. I mean, if you were a true pessimist, you actually just wouldn't care. But I think cynicism, you can express it verbally, and you can, but just playing music, live music it's a bit of a sport. I mean, there's still a way to win the game and still a way to lose the game, right? I mean, and if, who wants to hear somebody actually play the music that fits the mood that they're in at that given moment?
Well, that reminds me of at Radio City, and there was a certain couple years where the band car would roll up on stage, and then we'd roll back, and the Rockettes would do their thing, and then we'll say, Merry Christmas, and waving and smiling and kicking, and then as soon as the curtain comes down, everybody's energy goes boom. Like all the Rockettes, everybody backstage who have done maybe 3 or 4 shows that day, have another 2 more, whatever, like the incredible schedule they do. Like all of a sudden the act goes away because the curtain's down, and no one could possibly have that kind of energy in their regular life and do 3 or 4 performances.
But that makes perfectly good sense, because not just as a performer, but you can genuinely want somebody to have a Merry Christmas, even if you're not.
Sure. Absolutely. But the thing I love about it is the spectacular nature of the Christmas Spectacular, right? Is that's the presentation of it is so intense that it couldn't, in a certain way, it couldn't possibly be actually felt by every individual performing in the show. That would be an unreasonable thing to expect of the world.
Of course. And you're being mindful about other things, like what you're supposed to be doing.
But here's the connection. Here's the connection that's interesting, is that, like, really as an audience member, and I've seen the Christmas Spectacular once or twice, and I've seen you play a lot of times, and the ability to suspend the disbelief of, like I know that, like, if I think about it, you may not be in a great mood, but the way that you're playing doesn't exude that at all. It actually feels quite different than that. But it's funny because I'm having such a good time, I don't ever stop to think about that. I don't care.
Yeah, but then once you're actually in the act of making music, I mean, doesn't all that stuff just have to be put on hold? Doesn't your own little world and your own little sad feelings, all that has to be put on hold for whatever the ascribed amount of time that you have to weeple around the stages.
Well, that's something that I've gotten into lots of conversations about, particularly with people that don't play. Like, when the idea of music and art is to have an effect on somebody. It's not for the artist to have that feeling that they're trying to have somebody get while they're trying to get someone to have that feeling. We're not trying to meet here. The music is meeting you there. As an individual, it doesn't matter.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. And I think that it's one of those things that, people that love music and art kind of don't want to believe that. They want to believe that it's a shared moment in a different way. It is a shared moment.
I know.
But yeah. And it's that's an interesting thing. But let's get back to the clarinet for a second, because then, so it's true. We were friends in California.
Yeah.
Where our friendship, I think, really turned a page was a chance meeting around 96th Street in New York when I just happened to see you on the street.
Can you place that? I was trying to place that the other day. Was it 2000-ish?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, based on, so sad. Based on who I was married to and what I was doing. Yeah.
But it was here. It was up here. It was Upper West Side, huh?
Yeah. It was definitely on Broadway in, the 90s.
And like not far from Symphony Space.
Yeah. And this is like pre-social media, right? So it was one of those things of like, oh my God. Yeah. but to me, I think that the nature of seeing somebody that you were friends with in a completely different context, and you said, "Oh, hey, I'm playing this thing out at the library back where the World's Fair was out in Queens at the library."
That's
and we came out to see you play, and then we were back in touch, and it was much easier to be back in touch.
Yeah,
from that point, because at that point you were living in New Orleans still, right? Or either San Antonio or
yes. There was a weird in betweeny thing. So after we graduated, I hung out in Southern California for about one more year, and then in October of '94 to New Orleans. The very beginning of '96, San Antonio. That was about 3 years. And then there was this kind of weird transitional period where I wasn't sure where I was going to end up, but it was more between upstate New York and, I was talking to people about, how do you get closer to New York City? And then if I really wanted to do that, I went through a period where I didn't want to play music at all. And that was my first period where I didn't really want to play music anymore. And then started, heading back to New Orleans around 2000. Officially probably around 2001 again. So the period that in question, I might have been upstate and actually coming down to the city. This would have been around 9/11. This would have been kind of in that period where I'm just transitioning back to New Orleans. But as far as studying clarinet, it was really only those couple years with Gary.
Well, because it was at that point that when you said, "Oh, hey, I'm playing a gig down at the Cajun," which was like on 16th and 8th, that's when I first heard you play on an Albert System clarinet.
Yeah, I'd switched to Albert System by then.
And I remember I walked in and I told you this at the time. I don't know if you remember this. I said to myself, why is Evan the only one with a microphone? Because the sound projected so much. It actually sounded like you're the only one with a microphone. I asked you that. I said, why are you the only one with a microphone? He said, what are you talking about? I don't have a microphone. Like, what is that transition from the BAM system to the Albert system? Because I do remember.
There's a couple things on Albert system that actually are a little bit reminiscent of saxophone. And if you ever play recorder, there's a couple things that are a little bit reminiscent of actual playing recorder. And there's on this particular Albert system, there's a tiny bit of a spread. So there was some muscle memory that allowed me to actually switch systems back and forth because there's just enough of a spread to kind of lock in that other thing. But it was a very gradual transition, and then I couldn't play the BAM system at all. But
I remember certain gigs you would have both.
Oh yeah,
I remember coming to some where there were some things you would play on the BAM system.
Wow, interesting.
And I don't think it was that long. I don't remember how long it was because I know that like there was a certain period of time where I would only see you play once, and then a year later I'd see you play again. So to me, it's like those two things are right next to each other, but it was the whole year of your life in between where things are changing and things are happening.
As we're talking about this, I can remember, I have very distinct memories of several things that I carried from studying with Gary into the music. As we're talking, I'm remembering specific things. When you mentioned, when you mentioned the type of music that we were playing, or the reason that we make music, what that connection is. I remember very specific things, especially about phrasing, where from a very technical standpoint, what you're trying to achieve and what where you're trying to meet the composer at their intentions,
right?
Where you're trying to find the freedoms for yourself in their music, right? So there are very specific things I remember from Gary. When you mentioned the thing about playing loudly, I remember some specific things that Gary and working with Gary about just the difference between the way resonance works with the clarinet, as opposed to instruments that are more directional.
Right.
Right. I remember, so a couple minutes ago, you mentioned the idea that we weren't really doing the chord symbol idea. I remember that was actually coming a little bit from Gary. He just didn't. I just already had the nomenclature to learn how to kind of read ahead, so that you could see things in larger groups and not really have to read note to note to note to note to note. So all of that. I can remember specific things about just even articulation choices. I remember when you talked about the transition from BAME to Albert system. I remember specifically what things that I kept in order to kind of develop facility on the Albert system. What things that Gary and I worked on with the Closet scales and exercises.
Right.
I don't think I ever owned the whole Closet book. I think I always had this 30-page thing with the scales and exercises.
Right.
So I remember, a lot of it goes right back to those, what I consider kind of an intensive 2 years of clarinet work. It's ironic. You never knew this about me. I had the opportunity to, if I continued with where I started college, I would have eventually possibly been studying with Mitchell Lurie. He was in LA where I was at USC.
Funny.
But I didn't come to USC as a clarinet major. I came as a commercial studies or commercial music major, which was more, it was sort of the way to say jazz studies without saying jazz. So
yeah, a lot of schools don't want to say jazz.
Yeah, they were ahead of their time. And I didn't want to study classical saxophone. That just didn't seem.
Well, that's
silly.
weird, Evan. I've only heard you say really like things about loving the saxophone.
I detest the saxophone.
Well, I want to share.
Traditionally, don't I? Yeah.
I want to share the funniest thing I've ever heard anybody say about the saxophone, which was, the going back to that time that you quit music for a while or wanted to quit music for a while, and you said you were doing construction, and I made some sort of comment telling the story of like, yeah, like my narrative was much different than yours. So I was like, Evan is so committed to like really wanting to have his art be his true art that he was willing to work construction to make that happen. Right?
Specifically paving.
Right.
Specifically paving. I was on a paving crew for a minute. Yeah.
Yeah. And
asphalt.
But your response was, well, I could have made a living playing the music, but I would have had to play the saxophone.
That still happens. It still happens. There's just like a handful of people that know I play it.
Well,
and ironically, every time I'm blowing dust off it. I'm pulling it out of the back of the closet, and I spend about 10 minutes making sure it sort of functions.
I remember very vividly playing some gig with the Cal State Long Beach Jazz Band, and we were playing in some sort of outside place downtown, and we were playing.
What a memory you have!
Yeah, well, it gets spotty in a second because we were playing something that had a pretty significant tenor solo in it. And you did this, and again, maybe I'm projecting this upon you, but you sort of played the history of the tenor saxophone in your solo. You started out sort of sounding like Coleman Hawkins, kind of switched into Lester Young, kind of switched into Don Byas, and then started playing stuff that was like more contemporary, like sort of like Brecker-ish type of sound.
Good heavens.
And I was like, that's irritating. It's irritating someone can do that. Because at the time.
On the clarinet I did that?
No,
on the saxophone.
No, on the tenor saxophone you did that.
Oh, good heavens.
That's when when I was thinking about your playing and how you go about the process of playing, it was clear to me that you have an ability to hear something in your ear tonally and harmonically that translates you might not say it's easy, but to me it seems easy to be able to turn that into something on an instrument. And that's one of the things that's, I think, really, really powerful about how we learn and how we can play stuff is, right? It goes, we imagine it and then we make it happen. And having the skills on the instrument to make it happen is how it happens. But we spend so much time learning our instruments, which is, I'm not like that's a bad thing, that we forget that we have to hear it first. And the jazz background really never you can't let go of the fact that you have to hear it first.
It was the tip of the iceberg, but Gary, I can remember having conversations with Gary about voicing. And it's plain and simple. To me, voicing is everything about having different accents. Like every ethnic music that I've kind of dabbled with, the differences about having the right accent is
Right.
largely voicing.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah. And that's from Gary. And pitch. Pitch is largely voicing. You don't want it to be pressure. So
Right.
if it's going to be something besides pressure, changing and adjusting, I mean, maybe a little bit pressure, but if you don't want it to be pressure changing a lot, then it's going to be here. So it's going to
Right.
be here.
Yeah.
That's all Gary.
Yeah, I mean, that's where all my sort of foundational things about how I play and how I teach, that's really important because that is the whole thing, right? I mean, that really associating our sound with our voice and how are we using our voice and what kind of accent goes along with it. Cause like when I play things in a particular style. Like I play classical clarinet, but then my strength is I can play a variety of styles, but I play playing quote unquote in the style of. You actually play a real, like classical clarinet is a real style. I don't want to say like I do that, but like when I hear you play, you're playing in the style of a New Orleans jazz clarinet player of a particular era, but it's a modern version that has a lot of you in that, but you're playing that style, like which I feel very envious of because I want to be able to play a style rather than in the style of, right? Cause I can make it sound appropriate for music that is serving another need, like a Broadway show. I can play a very convincing New Orleans jazz clarinet player in that context. If I'm standing next to you, it's like I can't do it at all, right? and that's always been one of the frustrating things for me because I want to play genuinely in a lot of styles, and I can really only do one. I mean, classical clarinet is a pretty broad category, but within that frame, and it's funny because I think then that might also be, I don't know, you tell me, is that true for you? You have a style of playing, but I also think you don't want to play other styles of music, right? So you don't have the same sort of rub with it that I do because I very much want to. It's just,
I don't know, what I want to do if I want to do anything. I just know that if I'm going to do something, it's kind of gotta sound right. Or I'm not gonna, now I've been dabbling with some other, I guess musics of the Near East. So I'm learning a little bit about the music of Istanbul and the makam system that's in classical Turkish music. And that has for clarinet, that's a thing. I studied I did a workshop of Persian ney with this monster playing ney, and I just was using a C clarinet to try to imitate some of the same sounds. So, but there's a certain, each of these things have a certain type of ornamentation and certain accent, and it's I struggle. I don't think I want to play these styles of music, but if I'm going to take the trouble to do it, I really try to get down to the minutia of what makes it sound the way it does. There was a Greek clarinetist just passed away, Petrolukis, and his with the whole Greek music. That's a whole nother thing, and it's all here. But do I want to actually play that kind of music? I don't know. For myself, for my own pleasure, I guess.
I feel a conflict in you at times about play, like what it takes for you. Like, I feel like it's taking something from you to play the music or to play music, not the music, but just music. And that, cause you pretend to be retired sometimes.
Pretend. Well, look, our kids are almost the same age.
Right.
We got another thing we're working on right now.
The first time I thought about it, the juxtaposing us, you and your Carmen Ghia, me and my 83 Corolla, back then in the early 90s versus the two of us walking around the Bronx Zoo with our kids. Like, how did we get from there to there? I didn't see it for either one of us. I had no idea you were going to be as interested in being a dad as you are. I had no idea I was going to be interested in being a dad as much as I am. And then there we are. And then as I was cleaning up the house today, I thought, no, Evan's probably cleaning up his house too.
Totally.
Looking forward to talking to you today. And, and so, yeah, that's pretty much what we do, right? We clean up the house.
I'm supposed to be doing laundry now.
I still love the clarinet. I still love the music. I still love doing the teaching, the playing. I love everything. It's just weird when something else is in every way more important than that. Like, it's so much different than it felt to do it back when it was the most important thing.
There's an area where Gary and I never had a discussion. Gary was a great teacher, because, so here's the thing. As a student, if you actually don't know what you want to learn, that's going to be a problem. If you're a teacher and you don't adjust to what the student is actually aspiring to do, that's a problem. Maybe not when they're super young, but I didn't study music super young, right? I'm
right.
talking about university level. And if you're gonna waste the time, spend the time and resources to study music in college, then know what you want out of the situation and have a private instructor that can modify, or that can kind of see within kind of what you envision two things. That they have the ability to see what things you might need in your toolbox to do what you say you want to do, and also to make sure that the student isn't being too narrow in the thinking and is actually getting to know some other choices through what you're doing. Some of the things, for Gary, it was more things that were kind of just universal. This is clarinet stuff. It doesn't really matter what you're going to do. It doesn't matter for whom you're going to do it. It doesn't matter with whom you're going to do it. But this is some clarinet stuff. And that's what I needed. That's what I needed most of all. And that's what I got out of it. But we didn't have any conversations about, what you're going to do. Where are you going to do it? What are you going to do for it? It was just kind of, I was already playing gigs when I was in those last 2 years of school, and had great instructors that would just let me put on a Walkman tape recorder and fall asleep in the corner of the room and then listen to the class in the car on my way to a gig or something like that. That was
you were going down to San Diego for a long time, playing at Croce's.
There was a lot of back and forth. It was Southern California. You'd have to drive everywhere. We just, it was going everywhere. It was a lot of car time. Car time.
Looking at it from a young person's standpoint that's going into music, that wants to go into music, the more specific you are, the more you're able to gain the skills to do that very specific thing you want to do. Your specific thing was super specific, right? Because it's jazz up to a certain year, kind of, right? Is from a certain place.
I think that's how it started. I'm thinking
back to when you were studying with Gary.
Yeah.
But more as that period of a musician's life, where it's a tough thing, because if the idea is to make a living playing music, that's pretty general. It's specific, but it's general. And the more specific you get, like, I want to do this. Like, I'm making this up, but I want to play New Orleans jazz clarinet just as it was played in 1928. Okay. So there you have a specific set of goals. It's very narrowly defined, which means you can acquire those goals more efficiently when you're directed towards it. But it also means that's a much harder way if that's your skill, as opposed to being able to do a wide variety of things. But being able to do a wide variety of things means that in order to succeed, you're getting hired to do things that you're less of a specialist at. right? So
Yeah.
it's a weird, and it's harder to acquire that broad set of skills.
I'm not close enough to that community, the teaching community, to know if the goal is for their students to have
Well, but I was thinking of it more from the
profession.
Student. I was thinking of it more from the student standpoint.
Oh.
Right? Like of where they're directing themselves.
Yeah. I don't teach enough to have, if I teach, the students have an idea about what they want to work on. I don't have students that are kind of blank slates and don't have a clue what they want to work on. And I don't know what I would do with a student that I don't know what I would do with someone who didn't already kind of have an idea about what their goals were.
Right.
But I also don't know what exists for them out there, as professional musicians, if they're going to be very narrow. I'm meeting in New York. In New York, it's tricky. I don't know. The whole specialization thing doesn't seem to be. I get a lot of I just want a little bit of that. I want to be able to do a little bit of that. I want to get some of that thing, whatever that thing is, and that thing could be a style. It could be a skill set in terms of reading. I want to be able to be able to read enough to play a Broadway show. I want to be able to, I think there's a sort of that whole jack of all tradesness is still kind of a thing. And I think the reason that you just don't have a lot of people that are rising to be amazing artists is because they're pretty busy just trying to do as many things as they can to pay the rent.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's funny to think about like what it takes to be, when I say a young person, I mean between 18 and 25. If you're holding the clarinet, it's not like pianists or violinists where if you're going to be a concert violinist, you've got to already know the violin pretty well by the time you're 7. Right. I mean, like, clarinet's not like that. Right. But in terms of even separating it out further from the being able to play the clarinet versus musically having a really refined idea of what it is that you want to do. Like, what is it that you want to go out in the world with your clarinet and do what?
Yeah.
But like for me, like so many of the students that I teach, well, all the students that I teach now, I'm trying to make it so that it's an adult amateur community of people. No one's trying to go out and make a living playing music. I mean, they might play a gig, but they're not trying to make a living playing music. And it's very freeing to teach people who don't have, their goal is to find meaning and joy in the clarinet.
Yeah.
Which I can help them with very, very much, but it's much different than the 20-year-old who wants to make a mark in the world.
I get that. I've taught older people that, and there's this, I struggle with this. Just, okay, what do you do with this? The student has an idea about kind of what they want to be able to do and what they want to play. And then you say, okay, well, all right. So, there's some areas where we need to fill in some information. We have to get down to, I have students that basically just outright said, oh, well, I want to do that, but I don't really want to learn harmony. But I don't really want to, do exercises on the clarinet, right? I mean, can you imagine that, they want to be able to do that thing at a level just enough to be able to do something that they heard on a record, but they don't actually want to learn how to play the clarinet, or they want to be able to improvise, but they don't really want to study harmony, right? I mean, I don't know. What do you do? I
had a friend who put it really, really well. Yes. Well, those are people that just want to learn how to play the clarinet.
To want to learn. No, right. I mean, it's not about the clarinet for them. They want to be able to do a certain thing on the clarinet, but there seems to be a disconnect. Well, to do that, you've got to learn how to play the clarinet. Oh, why do I have to do, No, yeah. But I'm not trying to do that. I'm not trying to learn the clarinet. I just want to play music using the clarinet. It's tough
to align all of that in terms of managing expectations, right? Because I think in so much of our lives, if we have an expectation, even if it's an expectation we don't like, if we buy into that expectation, we can live with that. It's just, somebody who thinks that something can happen without doing all those things has an expectation that's not fulfillable, right?
I mean, even with some of the people we went to school with, I was astounded about what they actually listened to in their spare time. And it had very little to do with the type of music that they had to play in the ensembles and they had very little. I'm not saying they all had to just love classical music night and day, but I was pretty surprised how kind of weirdly illiterate some of our peers were about the music they're working on.
I know what you're saying, because I never understood, like, if you want to do this, I mean, because quite honestly, if you want to play music for money, you're making a fundamentally bad choice with your time, right? I mean, it's like making money. If any of us spent the amount of time doing something has a high earning potential, we could make a lot of money if we did it with the energy that we learned how to play these instruments, right? So as a value proposition financially, it's a terrible idea. But if you're that insane to want to do it, how could it be that you're not listening to that music? How could you not want to be a part of this in a particular way? It never made any sense to me.
And we didn't have all the tools that we have now. I mean, I don't even think we had iPods back then. I mean, we still had cassette tapes. But now, I mean, Elena's learning cello. I mean, and we can listen to multiple versions of any piece that she's working on. We can go to a website and find the original score. We can find urtext versions. We can do this stuff, and you can enjoy the kind of nerdy research that you would think musicians would just do. But there's just so many people that just don't really do any of that.
Well, but speaking of my second favorite child, next to my own child, Elena is definitely my second favorite child.
Oh.
Like she approaches the cello with that same joy that you play the clarinet. When a couple New Years ago, when she, in her pajamas, played some cello for the whole group of people at the party, like, it definitely had that spark of, like, simultaneously, like, I love what I'm doing, and check this out.
Yeah.
Check out what I'm about to do right here.
Yeah. We're struggling. This year she finally started to learn how to practice, and that was a bit of a struggle. She has her teacher's great I don't know. Did Gary have younger students than college age?
At some point in his life, I'm sure he did. I don't think when we were working with him, he did.
Right. Yeah. So her teacher has childhood experience, and he recognized, so Elena has a good ear. She can play things by ear.
Right.
The trick is to actually, to use that skill set, but at the same time, let's focus on what's actually on the page. Right. So we're struggling a little bit.
From a teaching standpoint and from a learning standpoint, it's really important that if you have a skill set that is incongruent with everything else, that can be a great advantage. But then if you proceed along too much using that advantage, it turns into a real detriment because the other skills atrophy or never grow the way that they need to.
Right.
And that's, but as a kid, I'll worry about that later. Check this out now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I get it.
We're right in that kind of in between, cause now there's an expectation of a certain level. She's pretty advanced for her age, and there's an expectation of a certain level of detail that, you and I didn't really get to until we were in college, really.
But speaking of that detail, I mean, getting back to the clarinet and learning music and learning the clarinet and kind of putting it all together, that's the thing that is, I think, the easiest thing to miss as a learner is the need to have the most specific idea of what you want to play, the most detailed idea of what you want to play in your mind to try and create. The idea being that, like, if you have a detailed version of what you want to play, you're going to get a much better version of that same thing if it's foggy. I remember watching Bill Evans talk about approximating things. Like, oh, that's approximately what that song is, but it's not exactly what that it's not exact. You need to be less approximate. And, it's funny, in my world of loving and studying jazz, that idea gets so much more clearly articulated than in classical music of having the most specific idea that you can of what you want to play. And then, bringing this idea of how to practice to develop those skills to actually realize and create that thing. That's amazing. Speaking of you and another performance that I saw.
Please tell me it wasn't my recital where I was doing a very approximate version of the Hindemith.
I don't think I was at your recital.
Let's just say it was very approximate. Not just the third movement, when it starts doing the 5/4 stuff.
But I remember you were playing at Joe's Pub, and you walked on stage and you were playing Jitterbug Waltz, and you played it with this super unfocused sound all the way through, and it was in a very, very intentional choice, and one that I would say is not easy to play that consistently unfocused in a way that was almost a subtone, but not a subtone. And it was all throughout the register of your clarinet. And I just remember thinking to myself that I loved, first of all, I loved the choice, but even more than that, I loved that there was a choice to be seen. And it was a specific choice. And not only did I think it was a good choice, but it was executed really, really well. That's the sort of freedom I see in what you do that I don't really have in most of what I do, right? Because what's if I'm playing in an ensemble,
you do not want to have this kind of mixture of non-pitch sound with non-pitch colors to your sound.
Right.
You don't. That's not really a desired thing.
There's so much of ensemble playing. You have to stick within the tradition from which it came, like the quote unquote performance practice, which is such a dry term, but how it's done, right? But when you're leading your own group and you're creating your own thing, you can do whatever you want. And that's always been the thing in hearing you play. That's always been so impressive, is that it does come from a tradition, but it's clearly not bound by a tradition. And that's always, like I feel like the way I always describe it is Evan plays New Orleans jazz music from the, early 20th century, but like it's new, like it's new music.
Well, when those guys recorded, it was new for them.
Well, but that's the thing. When I hear, so I'm not going to say anybody's name, but like when I hear music, whether it's classical jazz, whatever it is, that feels like we're just recreating things over and over. We're just recreating what it was like. Almost like we're looking at a picture of what it was like. But music that really moves people is music that sounds like it was created today, even though it wasn't, right? The style wasn't created today, but it's got that life to it. And that's where I feel like in hearing you play, that takes me from a friend that is interested to actually like a fan and somebody that wants to go check something out.
I mean, what are you putting on display? Are you putting the process on display? Are you telling a story? Is the music telling a story, or are you telling a story about the composer? It's like a friend of mine gave the analogy, one of our parent friends gave the analogy, she has a dance background. She's like, love Balanchine's choreography, but is that what the performance is about? Am I supposed to walk away going, wow, Balanchine's choreography was magnificent? Or am I supposed to actually be enjoying the dance performance? Right? So
right.
We have that struggle too, don't we? Because I remember specifically the music I was working on, and the stuff that I couldn't play now if I had to. I was working on this wonderful little Martinu concertina piece, and it had some harmony things in it that were kind of quirky and stuff like that, and it had some good energy, very danceable energy to it, kind of like some of the Bartok stuff. But it was easy for me to get caught up into the rhythmic energy of a piece.
Right.
Like that was my strength. I was already kind of gravitating toward that. And it helped me with phrasing. Did that allow me to have the most attention to detail and make sure every note was just perfect? No, not so much. So, the performance was probably always better than whatever if you walked away from my performance, you might have enjoyed it, but you wouldn't really have the crystal clear idea about what the composer wanted.
I hear you. I want to get real super clarinet nerdy before we run out of time. I've already heard you talk about this, so I just kind of want you to say things I've already heard. What differences do you feel are important? Let's take out the Albert System clarinet. Let's say somebody wants to play in a jazz style or jazz music itself on a BAME System clarinet. What sort of mouthpiece considerations have you found to be mouthpiece reed combinations that would be a good starting point, a good set of things to think about for somebody that wants to get into something like that?
This is the struggle that musicians, especially coming from classical backgrounds, have. They don't. It takes them out of their comfort zone to make these other sounds. And I think the combination that works best is pretty uncomfortable for people because you're constantly having to adjust and control, and they're not used to that. So in most of these ethnic musics, including New Orleans music, your pitch center is considerably lower than when you're playing with a nice, rich classical sound. And when that pitch center drops, you're going to lose some of the richness in terms of the overtones, but that's also going to permit you to use some of the vocal things that are in these styles of music, because a lot of them are coming from voice. So it's going to give you can't be at the top of your pitch center and have any room for vibrato. The pitch center has to come down for that. To have the kind of guttural feeling of blues or these other types of modal musics, you have to drop the pitch center so you have this flexibility. Let's say some music with microtones, and I consider blues microtonal, really, in a way. You're not going to achieve that here. It's all going to be achieved here. So I think that's what happens, and partially that's going to be facilitated by a more open mouthpiece and possibly a slightly softer reed. In some cases, an extremely soft reed. And you're going to lose some things. You're going to lose, upper register is going to start to be more uncomfortable. You're going to lose what you might consider richness in the lower register, right? But, you're going to lose the ability to control pitch, but because you're actually not trying to control pitch. You're trying to control pitch by controlling how you adjust it, but you're not just going to be able to blow the clarinet anymore and have it match, have it make a happy face on your tuning it.
actually heard you respond to before. So when I'm trying to play in the style of, like New Orleans jazz, would it be correct to make this assessment? Because this is how I feel. I want you to tell me if I'm on the right track here. In order for me to make that sound, I fundamentally can't do it exactly right on my equipment because my pitch is actually going to be so low that the equipment that I play on a millimeter pulled out is never going to I'm going to actually be playing out of tune in order to achieve that sound. That's exactly
the problem that a lot of people, they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. They struggle so much to get their instrument just right so that when they're at the top of their pitch center, it's pretty much spot on. But to have the dynamic ceiling that a lot of these musics have, and to actually have to, move faster air, play louder basically, the horn has to be set up sharp so that you can kind of blow it flat.
Right.
And then meet somewhere in the middle. And that's not comfortable for a lot of people. I mean, some people can do both. I can't really do both. So if I'm actually trying to play with a classical sound, yeah, I'm 20 cents sharp.
I mean, we're talking about a very specific kind of playing, right? Where somebody that's playing like Ken Pawlowski, Buddy DeFranco, Eddie Daniels, Ron Odrich, they're playing with a much more classical approach to the instrument.
Yeah, those three players are good examples of that, where they want facility. And so they actually have the horn set up much more closed mouthpiece, so that they can do that.
Right. Well, and then they're generally not. I mean, I've heard I participated in a presentation on New Orleans clarinet, and one of the things that you talked about really was the sound came from the conditions by which people were playing the clarinet in New Orleans. Whether it be parades or multiple gigs or trying to be able to play all day if they had work all day and they had to find a way to fit their sound into the situation that they were in. And, there's a lot of jazz clarinet playing that's no longer true. If you're playing into a microphone, there is no need to play like that. Right. Mm-hmm. A lot of the conditions by which that sound came to be what it was aren't in place in a lot of situations. Right. So that's also something like I remember when I can't remember whether you tricked me or whether I willingly did it, but when it was at Jazz at Lincoln Center and you were doing a presentation about it and you were trying to turn me into a New Orleans jazz clarinet player. But I had never heard you say those things. And I was like, God, that makes so much sense. I never would have thought of that before. But man, yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Like that,
meaning I gave you a shorter barrel.
Yeah.
And I made you drop. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, but even the whole idea that the genesis of this sound wasn't because they said, hey, that's the sound we want to make. Maybe that was part of it, but it was also kind of self-defense almost in a certain way. Like this came from a certain set of factors and that this was the tradition from that. And I think that it's easy to forget that a lot of times that's where traditions come from.
Pretty pragmatic choices, really, more than aesthetic. And then for other ethnic types of music, it's because we want to sound like, it's because they didn't have clarinets, right? It was coming from another type of instrument. So in Turkish music, it might be coming from the zurna, or even in New Orleans music, it might be coming more from violin. And then there's other musics where it's like, no, we're actually trying to come from a singer. So it's all, so there's that. So it's only an aesthetic choice in the sense that we're just not trying to play the clarinet. We're trying to do something else. We're trying to make some other sounds using a clarinet. And then there's some choices that are more pragmatic because of the actual conditions.
Right. But
environmental or...
things that we've been talking about, right? Which is, you know, being able to hear what it is that we're trying to play, but also using our voicing, our actually, you know, actually like the back of our oral cavity, using that apparatus to actually influence the sound, because it's not, I mean, the reed has to vibrate. I mean, what makes the sound is what makes the sound, and that is the reed vibrating. It has to vibrate evenly. These things are all true no matter what style of clarinet you're playing, right? You know, and so there's only so much flexibility we have with our actual mouth that's touching the clarinet, right? We can't be changing that too much. Like,
Yeah.
a little bit, but not like that. Otherwise,
There also has to be a point where you're able to kind of hear what might be happening, and you gave a couple good examples. So Buddy DeFranco is a good example, but if you go back and listen to that album he did with Art Tatum, you kind of have to get an idea about, you know, well, how's he setting up his clarinet to do that. Artie Shaw, his later recordings from the early 50s, you know, he's actually playing very close to the microphone, and he's playing with very slow air, right? And so that has a different sound than, say, Artie Shaw in the 30s. And you kind of have to know how they're doing that. And when it comes to recording technology, you kind of also have to know, how microphones work. You have to know. So when I did the Jitterbug Waltz, and I'm pretty sure that it was only possible because they did stick a microphone on me, and so, well, I may as well use it, right?
right.
You know, Eddie, what was the album he came out with when we were in college? Breakthrough, his first
Yeah.
JRP thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but his evolution on JRP changes, right? He's, you know, by the end of it, he's playing some really real jazz clarinet. But at the beginning, you know, I think he was obligated to do that record on this Yamaha, and you know, plays the crap out of Solfeggero. But well, I just mean it was different. It just was a different sound,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was. I don't think it was even necessarily his sound, but you know, you actually have to be mindful about, okay, what is the evolution of the exposition of the theme, the CPE Bach theme, and then when he goes into the solo section, what is he, you know, what's happening physically? What's he actually doing?
Right.
Where does the sound kind of make this departure?
Well, I've actually worked really hard on that transcription. And what's interesting to me is, I'm not proposing that I sound just like Eddie Daniels when I play the jazz part of it, but the jazz part of it is in some way significantly easier than playing that tune at that tempo, which is really hard.
Yeah.
Try
it on Albert's system.
But the Bach part of that throws me for a loop more than the solo part of it throws me for a loop.
For sure.
But which was surprising, because the transcription he's playing some real serious stuff there.
Yeah.
But
for real. again, all those wide interval leaps, you know, those spread out, voicings, which kind of simulate, string crossings on the string instruments, you know, that was all Gary, you know, teaching us how to kind of balance to that lower note, and
right.
You know, and then let the airstream kind of come on top of that, you know, where it needs to, and be able to play the whole horn at all times, so that you can actually go, you know, right, those wide jumps, right?
Right.
And the people that we hear doing that, you know, there's all those cats that make those funny YouTube videos and stuff, with that Nicholas Cat and the people, they're really playing the piss out of the clarinet. You know, yeah, they're doing that well. That's like the thing that they do really well. And the trick is to be able to combine that level of thought about your airstream and air speed as well. You know, concentrate on those things while you're actually trying to do this other thing. That's a whole nother, that can be our next conversation, because I am actually, I hope you can't hear me thinking about it, but you know, when I'm playing and I'm improvising, when I'm doing music, it's definitely as far from Hindemith and Martinu and Brahms and Weber. It's very far away from that, but I'm thinking about a lot of those very same things in terms of where I want each note to be dynamically, where I want to, you know, where I want the dynamic to start on a note. If I want to start the note with an articulation, without an articulation, I'm actually still thinking about very clarinet-y things. I just do my best to disguise it.
You do a good job of disguising anything that seems. That was going to sound insulting.
I know what you mean. It's not an insult. It's okay.
It doesn't appear to be thoughtful. right. In the sense that like
you don't give me the impression that you're thinking about playing the clarinet properly at all. So good on you.
Well, but I think that's the thing that we all want to hear. Listen to music. We want to hear somebody playing music. We don't want to hear somebody playing an instrument, right? We want them to transcend that thing where, like, when I go hear a clarinet player, I can't not hear them play the clarinet, right? I'm going to hear that, but I don't want to be so distracted with, man, that clarinet playing is so good that I can't, like, the music isn't strong enough to, like, get me interested in that instead. Because I don't want to go to a performance and hear somebody play the clarinet. I want to go hear them play the music on the clarinet.
Yeah.
Right. And so taking that step out is, I think, which is difficult conceptually speaking, because it's not easy to play the clarinet, like, on that level. Right. I mean, like, that takes a lot of work. And to think, okay, I'm going to try and disguise the 17,000 hours I played, like I practiced to make this happen. I don't want anyone to hear that. Like, I don't want anyone to pay any attention to that. There's something ironic about that. But listen, man, I've got to run pick up my kiddo, and I think you got to go to But let's do this again.
Sure, man.
Yeah. All right, man. Thank you
Anytime.
very much. All right. Well, that was a conversation that represents something I feel very, very lucky to have in my life. To be able to have friends to have conversations like that with, and then even luckier to be able to share them publicly. So check out Evan. I'll leave the links in the description of the show notes. 5-star review, please. Leave a comment anywhere you are. How is it that you can apply these ideas to your clarinet and to your playing? I'd love to hear it. Let's listen to Evan as we end this podcast and just really review the ideas of how do we make our playing foundationally sound to do whatever it is that we want. What kind of music do you want to play? How can you take these ideas and make them your own? We all need to find our own voice, but our voices come from the same central ideas with the clarinet. And that is such a wonderful thing to be able to share with my friend Evan, and for Evan and I to share with you. We'll see you next time on the Clarinet Ninja Podcast.